Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we will try to remember Daniel Naroditsky. Um, as many of you know, Daniel passed away a couple of weeks ago. Um, Daniel was probably one of the people who I enjoyed watching on YouTube the most. He of all the channels out there, his was probably one of the most, if not the most instructive. And in addition to being an incredible teacher, Daniel was also a great individual. And this is something that I try to stress to um, my students and everyone else that it's not enough to just be a good chess player, you have to be a good human being, which is why while I admire the talent and the accomplishments of people like Alokine, people like Bobby Fischer, people like Kramnik, I do not view them positively overall because it's not enough to be good at chess, you also have to be good at life. And that's an important lesson. Now, to remember Daniel, we're going to look at one of his games. Um, Many people already showed the number of Daniel's more famous games, like his victory against Fabiano Caruana. I will show one of his less famous games. I will show one of his Blitz games because it's very instructive and it teaches a number of useful lessons about chess. This is from one of his speedruns. This is one of the older ones from a few years ago. Daniel was black. His opponent played knight f3. Daniel was always known for playing the King's Indian, and this is what he played in this game. Plays knight f6. His opponent plays d4. Daniel plays g6, going for the King's Indian setup with bishop g7 and pawn d6. Pawn c4, bishop g7, knight c3, with the idea of pawn e4, castle, and we got our King's Indian setup. Pawn e4 and pawn d6. Stop in e5, also opening the door for the bishop. This is your typical King's Indian setup. And Black's plan at some point will be to challenge the center with either move c5 or move e5. Depending on what White does and depending on Black's move. Bishop e2 is played. This is the main line. The point is to castle. And Daniel plays e5. So one thing to quickly note is White is not really threatening to win the pawn because takes. In the end of this line, Black has a discovery taking this pawn. This is useful to remember, especially if you play the King's Indian. Daniel's opponent plays d5 immediately, which makes perfect sense. It's not the main line. The main line is to castle, but d5 is a very viable move, and it's still looking at the database. We have close to 5,000 games. After d5, Daniel plays a5, which looks like a mysterious move, but the point is uh Black wants to get the knight to this square and make sure that he stays there. The point being knight here, or occasional knight here, knight c5, and white cannot play b4. So this is the point of a5. White castles. That move makes perfect sense. Daniel continues with his plan knight a6. That's a good knight. And white decides in this position to play a move knight e1. So what's the point of knight e1? Well, Maybe white will play f3. Also, occasionally black can do things like knight h5 and pawn f5. It deals with that. Sometimes this knight can go to d3. Essentially, white is playing a useful move. Daniel continues with his plan knight c5, putting more pressure on this pawn, and white plays f3. Now, f3 makes everything very solid, but it does weaken the dark squares a little bit. So this is just something useful to keep in mind. And also notice, since there is no bishop attacking the square, Daniel now plays knight h5. One of the ideas in the King's Indian is the ability to play pawn f5, attack the king. So Daniel is getting ready to do that. Knight h5 is played. White plays bishop e3, improving the bishop, and black plays b6. The point of b6 is just to stabilize this knight. By the way, if white ever trades this bishop will become much more powerful. And remember, white put his pawns on the light squares, which means the dark squares are going to become a lot weaker for white. This is an important idea to remember, especially as you're getting better at chess. The concept of weak squares. After b6, white played a3. The point of a3 is to play b4, and Daniel plays a4 himself. The idea being, if white plays b4, we will Aupassant. And remember the Aupassant rule: when your pawn is on the fifth line for you, white cannot make this push. And white makes a strategic mistake here. White does take the knight. As mentioned previously, it means this guy becomes more powerful. The reason why he does that is he thinks he wins his pawn, because the knight protected this pawn, and now white has two attackers. Alright, Daniel takes back, white wins a pawn. The problem for white, again, is now his dark squares are weak, and that extra pawn is not incredibly relevant. And Daniel immediately takes the dark squares. He plays bishop h6, maybe to play bishop f4, maybe to play bishop e3. Now, in this position, white played. Um, in this position, white played queen b3. And after queen b3, already black has a very, very powerful attack. And Daniel puts that attack in action. He sacrifices the rook. The idea is to draw the queen away from the dark squares. The queen takes back, and now Daniel checks. The problem for white is he has two moves. He can move the king, or he can block with the rook. If this is actually very important, if he blocks with the rook, you don't take. A lot of people do this. They see a way to win material and they do it. Notice we just give up material. So take advantage of the spin, play queen h4, put a lot more pressure. If white plays here, we will just take. Everything is falling apart for white. In the game, white play king h1. But again, we see the importance of weak dark squares. The queen comes in, and black has a very, very, very simple threat of knight g3. And it's very, very, very difficult to stop. If white plays something like pawn h3, knight g3, by the way, is checkmate because of this. Another common idea in the King's Indian is this bishop a lot of the time will sacrifice itself in order to open everything. So this game is essential over after queen h4. So to review, a couple of ideas in the King's Indian. Number one, this is the setup which you want, with the idea to play the e5 with c5. Idea number two, you're not afraid to have my take, because you will always get the pawn back. Idea number three, um, idea number three, remember this concept of stabilizing your knight on this square by playing a5. And this knight, a lot of the time, is very useful. And remember, in these lines, white does not really want to make this capture, especially if you play against the king's Indian, because then your dark squares become really weak. And the last thing to remember, material is only one important thing. King safety, piece activity, a lot of the time are more important. And Daniel demonstrated these concepts really well in this game. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you will learn a lesson, not just something to use in your chess games, but also you will follow Daniel's example of being a good human being, being kind to others. Um, and on this note, I don't have too much else to say. I will be back soon. Please like, please subscribe.